Welcome to the reading of the Course in Miracle URTEXT. The Course in Miracle URTEXT is this book, and this has been put together by Miracles in Action Press. This is in public domain, and the scribe is obviously Helen Schuckman, and it says here William Thetford as well. And the editor is Doug Thompson and publisher Doug Moncton. This URTEXT manuscript includes the 7 volumes, four volumes from the Foundation of Inner Peace. This is an edited or abridged version, which most of us are familiar with. There is 3 more books, so it includes the text, the workbook, the manual for teachers, and the use of terms. But it also includes the psychotherapy, the song of prayers, and the gifts of God. And everything is inside this book. This book, when I bought it, it came together with a CD, and that CD you could basically search through the URTEXT manuscripts, and you could search through everything. It was very enlightening, especially as I was trying to understand what is the subconscious, what is the superconscious, what is the Holy Spirit, and really kind of trying to understand, because much of the stuff in the text of the blue version, it wasn't clear to me. It didn't make 100% sense. But when I read the yellow, read the yellow telephone book version, the URTEXT manuscripts, suddenly a lot of the stuff sank in, and I understood it better. That said, I do not recommend you start with this. I recommend you start with A Course in Miracle, the blue one, the Foundation for Inner Peace, because it is the easiest to carry. You can start reading the text, and the text will not make as much sense for you before you actually don't do the course. I started the Course in Miracles, started on the course, on the workbook straight away when I received it, and read the text simultaneously. Some suggest that you should read the text first and then start on the workbook, but that would have not worked for me. If I would have started with the text, there's no way I would have ever reached the workbook. So each one of us has to do it whichever way it suits them best. Some people even start first with the manual for teachers, or with the use of terms. But you're going to be drawn. If you're drawn to the Course in Miracles, you're going to be drawn to the necessary book. And if you are doing it with me, maybe you started with me and doing the Qigong classes together with me while you're doing the Course in Miracle workbook, that is also fine. But the Course in Miracle workbook and the lessons, they are not going to give you the insight, the mental, spiritual understanding without the book. So that's why the book is really necessary to bring clarification to the lessons. So it is a work, it is a unit, it works together. And in this particular reading here, I just want to go through the beginning of the reading, because there is about 50,000 words missing in this abridged version, which is especially the communication in the beginning. And also for me, in the beginning, it made it all human. It made it more tangible. You can see the process that Schuckman and Thetford actually went through by receiving this text, and also their own disbeliefs and their own difficulties they had to go through, and some of them is rather personal. William Thetford, he was homosexual, so this has been addressed in the beginning of the first chapters of the book as well, and it brought light onto sexuality itself, because there is not so much talk about sexuality in the Foundation for Inner Peace, and here it is being brought. There is talk about it. There is clarification about it, and that is also why I very much like it, because I don't like when there is certain topics which are completely taboo. I don't like that. I think it's necessary that everything can be talked about and seen how it needs to be brought to light and talked about, because sometimes there is hidden gems in those taboo topics. Many will know that the course was first, and it says here in the preface, by Doug Thompson, who is the driving force behind putting all these manuscripts together here and putting it together in this book. I have got no idea if you can actually still get it, but I will put the link below into my website, and where you can also order the book. It says here in the preface, by Doug Thompson. Those familiar with the editions of A Course in Miracles previously available will find this edition of the URTEXT manuscript substantially different, especially in the early chapters of the text volume, due to the fact that it is far closer to the original dictation, having been typed by the scribes before most of the subsequent editing and abridgment took place. While much more extensive documentation is provided in the appendices, in this preface, I wish to very briefly summarize the major attributes of this edition, explain what distinguishes it from other editions of A Course in Miracles, and briefly describe the purpose behind its preparation and publication. Many will know that the course was first printed in 1976 by the Foundation for Inner Peace, that it has subsequently sold millions of copies, that it has been translated into many other languages, and that it is increasingly quoted in published works. The Foundation's claim that its version is virtually unchanged from the original inner dictation received by Columbia University psychology professor Dr. Helen Schuckman beginning in 1965. That was widely accepted for many years. Schuckman and her colleague Dr. William Thetford repeatedly retyped the original shorthand notes, and over the course of a decade, that first manuscript was edited into the much shorter version that was published by the Foundation for Inner Peace in 1975 as A Course in Miracles. This voice was, according to Schuckman, unambiguously that of Jesus of Nazareth. In January of 2000, 3 earlier versions of the course emerged on the internet, which were dramatically different in the first 8 chapters. Far from being virtually unchanged, the early manuscripts not only contained a vast amount of previously unpublished material, they revealed that in the later editing, much that wasn't entirely removed was extensively rewritten, sometimes almost beyond recognition. Prior to 2000, only one version of the course was available. The abridged version published by the Foundation of Inner Peace. The 3 earlier versions which have emerged are in chronological order of their creation. The first one was called The Original Shorthand Notes, then the scribe's first very lightly edited URTEXT, and the scribe's second edit, the substantially abridged Hugh Lynn Case version, short HLC. Our 4 versions then consist of these 3 manuscripts which had remained hidden for decades, plus the abridgment of the HLC prepared by Schuckman and Wapnick in 1973 to 74. Kenneth Wapnick, he came later into the picture as kind of a guardian of A Course in Miracles. Published by the Foundation of Inner Peace, this one, beginning in 1975, virtually unchanged, it is in fact the 4th major revision of which copies have surfaced, being some 48,000 words shorter and substantially rewritten in the early chapters. There is very good reason to believe that the scribes prepared additional manuscripts which either have not survived or are still being withheld from scholarship by their custodians. However many additional manuscripts there may be, these 4 very different versions of the course we currently have allow us to trace the extent and nature of the editing from the first scribing, which are called the notes, to the last edition, the 1975 abridgment, along with 2 points in between. An examination of the differences from one version to the next reveals a number of common elements. In each version, some scribal errors were corrected. Second, due to the near total lack of proofreading, there are many hundreds of copying errors from one version to the next. Many are dropouts in which a word or two, a line or two, a paragraph or two, or in one case an entire page, it was inadvertently omitted. Most of these errors are reproduced in subsequent versions along with new ones introduced with each retyping, such that it is true that the more they edited it, the worse it got in a very real and measurable way. I just want to read this one more time. Most of these errors are reproduced in subsequent versions along with new ones introduced with each retyping, such that it is true that the more they edited it, the worse it got in a very real and measurable way. Substantial segments which were not removed were rewritten, in some cases changing most of the words but not noticeably changing the meaning, and in other cases apparently altering the material unintentionally such that the original meaning is distorted or even entirely lost. The extent and frequency of rewriting increases over time. There is very little editing in the URTEXT manuscripts, and what there is really is minor. In the last edit, there is a vast amount of rewriting, which frequently entirely changes the meaning of passages. In some cases, material is preserved accurately, but is removed from the original topic of which it is a part and placed in an entirely different discussion, thus altering the meaning of the passage in context. This is, for example, in the first chapter, the introduction of miracles. In the URTEXT, it goes over several pages. It is like a very long chapter, which we are going to read together. In some cases, material is preserved accurately, but is removed from the original topic of which it is a part, and placed in an entirely different discussion, thus altering the meaning of the passage in context. Again, there is very little of this at first, and considerably more in the later version. While many of these differences are individually of little significance and would attract little notice if few in number, they are not few in number, and collectively the fact that there are thousands of them is a considerable significance. The complete removal of the lengthy discussion on sex and possession, whether one views its removal as a correction or a corruption, cannot be fairly described as a minor change. If we then consider the differences as a whole, it is fair to say that the next effect of such a vast number of mistakes is to substantially blur and in some cases distort the message which Schuckmann initially heard and committed to paper. Most who have read both this URTEXT version and the later abridged versions find the earlier version to be much more readable and understandable. While the abridgment certainly retains most of the core message, it often does so in extremely condensed, abbreviated language, which is missing large amounts of explanatory material and concrete example illustrating the points being made. For the newcomer being introduced to the concepts for the first time, the removal of these bridges and explanations can make the material seem incomprehensibly dense, and that is what we most experienced. In some cases, the editing changes introduce overt distortions. Some of the omitted material is in fact extremely significant. The URTEXT says, I want to finish the instructions about sex because this is an area the miracle worker must understand. And I just have to add this, being a Qigong teacher. And this is what I love so much about Qigong and Taoism. They do not exclude sex. They did not, in fact, they're using the sexual power, which is the Jing in Qigong, to get enlightenment. This is what the Indians also do with the Kundalini. It's just that some people are distorting that Kundalini energy and they're using it again for the wrong purpose. But to understand that the creative force is actually rooted in the lower Dantian, and this is also where our sexuality is. This is where the creative force is rooted. This is where we have our desire to procreate. And to completely omit this and not add it into there, you are kind of giving the fundamental key necessary for understanding. You have removed it. And that is why I think it's so essential. Now while I'm reading this, I can see why this morning I was going to read something else in the Course in Miracles, then my pen fell out, and then it was pointing towards the URTEXT. And why the other day when I was recording a section which I was reading, the voice didn't work, the sound didn't work. So I got it as a message as, okay, delete this, this is not meant to be. And I had to wait an entire week again until I got this particular pen which was pointing to what I need to do. And now that I'm reading it, I now know that this is what I need to do. In some cases, the editing changes introduce overt distortions. Some of the omitted material is in fact extremely significant. The URTEXT says, I want to finish the instructions about sex because this is an area the miracle worker must understand. Not just the line, but all the instructions about sex vanish in later versions despite the author particularly drawing attention to the vital importance of this material. The author, Christ, or as Helen Schuckman puts it, Jesus of Nazareth, and here as well it says it like that. In some cases, the editing changes introduce overt distortions. Some of the omitted material is in fact extremely significant, and the URTEXT says, I want to finish the instructions about sex because this is an area the miracle worker must understand, and that's what we are, miracle workers. Not just the line, but all the instructions about sex vanish in later versions despite the author particularly drawing attention to the vital importance of this material. Because each version contains some material not found in any other, and each version after the original notes corrects some errors in earlier versions, none of these four versions by itself includes the whole of the dictation. So we can understand that this version here is the fourth version, and even that doesn't include the whole notes, the whole of the dictation, and none of it is without flaws. The URTEXT was the URTEXT version, this here, has several advantages relative to the other versions. It has much less editing than any later versions. It does have a few changes, however, and they are predominantly of three kinds. Dictated corrections are incorporated, where the notes contains dictated instructions for correcting previous material. So dictated corrections are incorporated. So where the notes contain dictated instructions for correcting previous material, it means the voice was telling Schuckman, you have made a mistake there, you need to go and correct it. In the URTEXT, the instructions are usually removed and the corrections are made as instructed. So they have actually listened to the instructions and then went back and changed it. There is at least one exception where the dictated corrections were not made. The instructions to capitalize cause and effect, for instance, is recorded, but the words were not subsequently capitalized. In a few cases, the dictated instructions remain. The second, the addition of a dozen or so dictated without notes segments which appear to be genuine dictation added after the initial scribing as expansions, clarifications, or correction of previous points. That Helen Schuckman, she had her own shorthand and she was just receiving it, writing basically what was coming, what she could hear was coming to her mind. Then she read her shorthand and basically dictated it to William Thetford. He then typed it up in a typewriter. And if he then didn't understand something, she would then get a message directly through to how the correction should be made. So this is what they're referring to. The addition of dozens or so dictated without note segments which appear to be genuine dictations added after the initial scribing as expansions, clarification or correction of previous points. While not present in the notes, most of this material is preserved in subsequent edition, having been accepted by all subsequent editors as authentic despite its absence from the notes. So what the corrections came when she was actually dictating to William Thetford, these are not in the URTEXT, but then you have them here. So that's why it is important to read both, and please start with this shorter version. The omission of most of the entirely personal comments which generally involve discussions between Shukman and the voice about personal relationship matters, dreams and the like. This material was clearly never intended to be part of the course, and its removal is directed by the voice. The voice said, this you need to take out. Aside from those three differences, each of which can be viewed as an enhancement vis-à-vis the notes, very little of the rearrangement and rewriting so noteworthy in the later editing appears in the URTEXT. While there are some dropouts of words and phrases, there are not many compared to the later versions. In order to determine what the original dictation really was, all the changes made to any particular passage need to be traced and evaluated through all the versions. In most cases, it is fairly obvious which of the variant readings is the most authentic. In some cases, two or more variants appear at first glance to be equally plausible candidates for authenticity. So this particular version is not a perfect version either. As it says here, there is a tendency among followers of most bodies of scriptures to wish to believe that their holy book is complete, inerrant, infallible, and the last word. I can certainly understand the desire for perception of a clear, definite statement that is unambiguous and absolutely trustworthy now and forever. That sort of thing can't be put between the covers of the book, of any book, however, and it is a serious misperception to suppose that it can be. The living God is dynamic, as is the relationship of love between himself and his creation. While the will of God is changeless, its expression in time through people is not. And no body of symbols given through people at a particular point in history can ever be the last thing God has to communicate to his creation. A book is static, like a snapshot, and like a photo, it can be accurate or it can be blurred by flaws and scratches and lose clarity through multiple recopying. But it is not alive. It does not find It does not find ever new forms with which to express the changeless truth. It is just one set of symbols from one moment in time, frozen in that moment. And here says the author, which is the Jesus of Nazareth. We're going to read that and then we're going to start reading our course. The author makes some useful comments on this aspect of words. The purpose of words is to limit, and by limiting, to make a vast area of experience more manageable. But that means manageable by you. For many aspects of living in this world, that is necessary, but not for asking. God does not use words and does not answer in words. Very, very important. He can only speak to the Christ in you, to the Christ in you, to that rays of light within you. That's why you must meditate. You must find a way to meditate, whether this is walking, swimming, cooking, to get into that flow, to get into this communion with this light within yourself, because you are the Christ. He can only speak to the Christ in you, who translates his answer into whatever language you can understand and accept. Sometimes words will limit fear and sometimes not. That is why some people hear words, some receive feelings of inner conviction, and some do not become aware of anything at all. Yet God has answered, and his answer will reach you when you are ready, like this pen this morning, pointing to the Course in Miracles, pointing to the URTEXT. Words can be helpful, particularly for the beginner, in helping concentration and facilitating the exclusion or at least the control of extraneous thoughts. Let us not forget, however, that words are but symbols of symbols. They are thus twice removed from reality. And this is also enumerated. This particular text is completely enumerated, so it's much easier to find things. It's not enumerated the same way as the Foundation for Inner Peace, but it has got the chapters. It says text, chapter 27, H, and then it goes on and on. So it's much easier to find as well things. Okay, God is the ultimate reality, and words on pages are twice removed. So they are twice removed of that ultimate reality. This we must remember when we seek to project onto them real aspects of God, such as infallibility, changelessness, perfection, inerrancy, etc. To project attributes of the divine reality onto a symbol is really idolatry and magic thinking. Magic thinking is a very, very important aspect to understand. It took me years to understand what the Course in Miracles was meaning by magic thinking, and also to identify the magic thinking within myself first, and then being able to identify the magic thinking in others. And as Course in Miracles teachers, we are not supposed to remove the magic thinking of others. We are supposed to just acknowledge and then listen to our inspiration from inspiration, basically to Holy Spirit or Christ within us, and then say what is needed to say to help this person understand magic thinking. It is not for us to correct. It is for us to be a channel to let it flow. To project attributes of divine reality onto a symbol is really idolatry and magic thinking. It is the worship of symbols or symbols of symbols in place of the worship of that which is symbolized, the one thing that is real, God, our Creator. Words are helpful if they direct our attention and concentration on reality. Words are counterproductive if we confuse them for reality and make of the symbols idolatrous objects of worship. And in the last analysis, the best version of A Course in Miracles is the one you read and the one to which you open your heart to the redemptive message of love and forgiveness, a message they all contain. One should also bear in mind that while for most readers faced with a variety of different versions, there is an obvious question about which one to choose. The respective versions are not competitors so much as they are complements. Each has unique strengths and weaknesses. Each is a witness to a single historical event that even being Helen Schuckman's hearing, a remarkable discourse and her note-taking during that hearing. Schuckman's hearing was not perfect. Her note-taking was not perfect. In her efforts to correct the errors in later editing, for a variety of reasons, she ended up introducing progressively more new errors while fixing a few earlier ones each time. Each version then is a precious resource, and each gives us more information about that original event to which each is a witness. By retracing her steps backwards through the versions and the editing and copying mistakes, we can generally distinguish the mistakes from the corrections with ease and do what no version yet to appear has done: extract the best from each of them. You will see miracles through your hands, through me. I suggest you order yourself the book, and as well, if you have done the blue book first, if you've done A Course in Miracles, or whichever one you basically feel drawn to, you order what you can and start reading text. And now you and me, we're going to begin on the URTEXT Volume 1, Chapter 1, Introduction to Miracles. Here is the link to that video. Here you have got Qigong classes for A Course in Miracles students, and here you have the list of all Course in Miracles recordings with Qigong. See you in the next video.